Okay, I want to talk to you for just a minute about the dreaded bubbles in epoxy. A couple tips to help prevent bubbles from forming. You want to mix really slowly. You don't do speed mixing. I do have a little handheld mixing paddle, which I only use when I'm doing bigger pours, like 600 milliliters to 1500 milliliters. I don't use it when I'm doing the smaller amounts because it whips in way too many bubbles. They recommend using silicone stir sticks versus wood. I haven't noticed that has introduced more bubbles when I do or don't use the silicone, but people have said that that's an issue that can help. I also make sure that I pour slowly when I'm filling something. That will help not introduce more bubbles. Now, there are some methods where you are trying to take the clear into the middle and push it out into the outer colors that you've poured to pull it back in. That you have to pour faster to get that effect. But in general, if you pour slower, that will help reduce the amount of bubbles that you'll see. So there are different ways to pop bubbles, and they are dependent on what it is that you're doing. So I'll kind of quickly explain each one and when and where to use it. So the heat gun will pop bubbles. It's nice to use in bigger projects, but you have to know that it's blowing air, so it will actually move your epoxy around. If you're okay with that and it's okay that it floats or moves or mixes a little bit, then this is a great one to use. Sometimes you're wanting to mix your colors, and so you use the heat gun to move it around and mix colors, and it'll pop bubbles at the same time. You do not want to use it on smaller things like this mold. It'll blow your epoxy right out of it. And so the heat gun is not for small things or small molds. I will sometimes, I don't have a cup here, but sometimes if I got a lot of bubbles on the top of my cup before I pour, I'll just hit it with the heat gun really fast. I don't sit it there very long. You'll burn your epoxy, you'll melt your cup. But it'll help pop the bubbles before I pour, so I will do that sometimes. The torch is really helpful. I use this a lot. This is what I use on my ocean cutting boards. This is what I use on really any board that I'm pouring. It is something that will pop the bubbles really well, but you want to make sure you keep moving. You don't sit, you don't hold, you are constantly moving, or you will burn your epoxy. And especially if you have a white in there, you can turn it brown really quickly. So you are just moving like that. You don't ever want to use this with molds. Learned that the hard way, and it's also recommended a lot on other people's channels, but you don't want to use it on molds because it will ruin the mold, and it will actually stick your mold to your epoxy, and when you try to demold, you will rip your mold and you'll have mold stuck to your epoxy project. So this never ever gets used if I've got a mold of any sort. So what I would use for molds is the lighter. And you just go over your project, you keep it moving. Okay, you don't sit there, but this will get your bubbles popped without causing issues. Now, if I sat there and held on the side, that can cause issues. I had a stubborn bubble once, and so I did hold it there for like that long, and I burned it to my project and ruined my mold. So you still have to be careful. It is definitely a just keep it moving thing. If you've really got it on the side of a mold, I'd try a toothpick first, or this other method that I'm going to show you, which is alcohol. You want to be really careful. You cannot use anything less than 91%. 91% or 99%. The only reason I have 91 is because I couldn't find 99 at the time. But you do not want to use anything less because it will have more water in it, and water and epoxy do not mix at all. You will keep your project from curing. So it has to be 91%, and you just spritz the top of it. It will pop out the bubbles. So that's a handy thing, but just know if you've sprayed this on top of your project to get rid of bubbles. Do not take a lighter or the torch to your project. You will set it on fire. So that's no bueno. We do have the big propane torch. That's really more for bigger projects. If you're doing big tables or end tables and you have a big thing that you're doing, or a top coat of a big end table sort of thing, I find this is too big for most cutting boards that I do. This torch is way more manageable to handle. But again, this would not be used for molds. It's for the big projects. As a side note, because we're talking about these tools, this one is a great one to help open up cells in your project, whether it's an ocean board or you're just trying to mix colors and get cells. If you hit your project with this, it will help pull out the cells in your project. This is also my trick for getting cells. So if I'm doing my ocean boards, I torch it to pop bubbles and open up the cells, and then I spritz it with the alcohol. Now, I actually have a different spritzer when I'm trying to do cells. I have this guy, it's a fine mist and it's an even mist, where this bottle is not fine and it's not even. So I tend to use this for cleanup or just for popping bubbles. If I want to open up cells, I use my fine mister. But this really activates cells in a project, and that's how I get awesome ocean waves. I've practiced a lot, their practice, and I have a tutorial on that you can check out on my channel also, that I go through the whole process for you. But the torch will open up cells, and then spritzing with alcohol will open up cells. But again, once you spritz with alcohol, the torch does not get used, or you will start a fire on your project. So these are tips and tools for popping bubbles for different projects that you've got. I hope that helps. Thanks for watching.